The U.S. government is poised to shake up global trade in April 2025.
I call it Liberation Day. April 2nd is Liberation Day.
The White House has proposed several kinds of tariffs.
A tariff is a tax on goods as they pass the border. For each instance in which a tariff is put on, it would lead to a price level shift. That shift constitutes inflation.
Economists say the administration's tariff plans could be inflationary. Some are on specific industries, like pharmaceuticals and automakers. Others are on entire countries.
They sound very inflationary. It sounds like they're going to jack up prices. The history of tariffs suggests that they generally don't. However, we could be in a whole new ballgame here.
Considering what has happened in the past few years, where we had quite some inflation in the US, it's going to be much more difficult this time to pass it through consumers.
That said, tariffs are not the sole cause for concern, according to the U.S. Central Bank, the Federal Reserve.
Trade, immigration, fiscal policy, and regulation. It is the net effect of these policy changes that will matter for the economy.
Are tariffs inflationary? Over the first half of the 2020s, the prices that Americans pay for items of all kinds rose at a fast pace. Higher tariff rates could make prices begin to climb again. This happens if businesses mark up their products.
A business markup is the difference between what a business spends and what it asks the consumer to pay. Because most producers and retailers charge a markup, it's really important to take into account how these markups respond to cost changes of imported components.
Businesses have the discretion to absorb those costs or pass them on to consumers.
You have to be aware that if you increase prices, consumers will consume less. We have been in this inflationary environment in the US for a longer period of time, so that the budget of consumer has gone down quite systematically for this kind of spending.
The White House rapidly proposed several tariff rate increases in the spring of 2025. This has led to confusion among a range of business leaders. The oil and gas industry, for example, is feeling pessimistic amid the uncertainty. Automakers have concerns too. Many parts within the vehicles cross borders under past global trade agreements. With tariffs in place, cars assembled in North America could cost $4,000 to $10,000 more.
Even though the American consumer is not necessarily buying this engine themselves, this is still going into the light truck that they are ultimately buying.
What we have seen, for example, is an increased inventory. A lot of cars were sent over the Atlantic and the Pacific pre-Trump, but it means also that you can have a slowdown then in production in these countries afterward.
Higher tariff rates on China, Mexico, and Canada alone could affect consumer prices.
That would add between 0.5 and 0.8 percentage points to core PCE inflation, depending on how you think markups will respond.
If tariffs reach the maximum levels suggested by Trump while campaigning for his second term, it could add up to 2.2 percentage points to core PCE inflation. In a statement to CNBC, a White House economic advisor said that tariffs from Trump's first term made no meaningful contributions to inflation. He added that foreign suppliers will have to eat the economic burden.
I think the odds are very high right now that we have not seen the last of the tariff proposals. He likes to use things as bargaining chips. And what he will do is start at the most extreme position and work his way in. The last thing Trump or any other president wants to do is to oversee a recession. If it's indicated that tariffs are going to cause a recession, he's certainly going to back down on that.
If tariff rates do rise, prices for products may cost more, even those made in the US.
For example, the clothes that you consume are imported. You also consume products that are made in America that also use imported components.
As a result, physical items, including pharmaceutical and medical products, new cars, clothes, and homes, could become more expensive. Inflation could also materialize in services like nursing, public transportation, and finance.
People might think, oh, tariffs can only affect the goods that I buy. It can't affect the services. If you are consuming a service such as hospital services, those hospitals are buying inputs. It might be, for example, like medical equipment that comes from abroad.
These tax hikes will also affect U.S. trading partners like China, Mexico, and Canada.
Canada which is a big U.S. trading partner, obviously not happy with the president's position right now. Mexico, not terribly happy either. A lot of problems in Europe. So the issue is how far this escalates.
China will retaliate. This time they're ready to do that. I think under the first Trump administration, they were taken by surprise. And this time they're pretty ready. And you will see a lot of tariff increases, but also non-tariff measures. That's even more important. For example, having more controls into US companies when they are acting in China.
Unwinding trade partnerships like these could slow global growth down. Gross domestic product in the US is still expected to rise, but it's rising at a lower pace than the estimates provided in January 2025. What's more, the tariffs may not achieve the administration's stated goal, rebuilding the country's capacity to make important products.
Of course, if companies are forced to reinvest in the US because that's the way they can sell more products, they will do it. However, we have to remember also there is a reason why companies went outside of the US. And most of the time it was because it was cheaper and more productive.
In theory, the Fed sees tariff-driven inflation as a one-time price level increase. In other words, they may think it is transitory.
History has borne out that view, actually. Look, eventually, all inflation will be transitory. It's just a matter of how you define transitory, what that time frame becomes. Eventually, there's an old saying in economics that the best cure for high prices is high prices.
But transitory could still mean months or years of additional price increases on a U.S. population that is already feeling tapped out.
Consumer sentiment's very poor right now. There are so many questions swirling around over where things are going, and it's jangling people's nerves.
What's more, the central bank says that using its tools at the moment could do more harm than good.
There have been plenty of times where people are saying very downbeat things about the economy and then going out and buying a new car.
The governors of the Fed forecast that consumer prices will increase 2.8% in 2025. That's higher than the central bank expected in December, but not so far off from the target 2% inflation rate. In theory, the Fed can slow down price increases by making the federal funds interest rate higher. This key interest rate can make loans for big-ticket items like homes and cars more expensive. At the same time, higher interest rates make it harder for businesses to hire new workers. In March, the Fed decided to not change this key interest rate.
The Fed Chairman Powell has indeed characterized, potential tariff-driven inflation as a transitory case, but he also emphasized the exceptionally high uncertainty in the current environment. And he said that if long-term expectations were to raise and were well anchored, then he will have to act.
When you look at inflation right now being whatever your gauge is, somewhere from the mid-2s to the low 3s, that's not way out of sorts for where we want to be, but it puts the Fed in this kind of box in terms of what can we do policy-wise. The answer right now isn't a whole lot, and they're not going to do a whole lot. They just don't know because we don't know the extent of tariffs.